Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first Ask the Expert session held live exclusively for ANOVA customers. Our expert presenter is Jay Minucci, founder and president of Service Agility, a consulting and training company dedicated to improving customer service and call center operations. Jay provides strategic and tactical guidance across all industries for companies seeking to optimize their customer interactions. His client list ranges from small startup operations to large Fortune 500 companies. Prior to starting his own firm, he spent 8 years as the vice president of consulting for International Customer Management Institute. Before becoming a consultant, he spent 17 years running mission-critical, award-winning call center operations. Jay has also written several white papers for ANOVA Solutions and delivers our real-time performance management assessment service, a one-day on-site service that helps companies outline and implement a strategy that utilizes the right set of metrics in real time to meet their customer satisfaction and overall contact center business goals. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this is the first of 4 expert sessions that we're going to be having for ANOVA Solutions customers. Today, the topic, as you know, is queuing behavior. On Thursday, May 21st, will be queue management, little-known tips and tricks, and then on Thursday, September 10th, real-time reactions, and in November, metrics as incentives. Just to briefly go over a few housekeeping items. Phones will be muted during the main presentation, and there'll be a Q&A session at the end. But we want to encourage you to ask your questions live during the Q&A period prior. We want to encourage you to ask your questions live during the Q&A period, but prior to that, you can go ahead and type your question for Jay in the Q&A area, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's session is being recorded, so please, again, remember to mute your phone. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jay Minucci.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. I know from having run a contact center, it's not always that easy to scratch an hour out of your day, so I really do appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us. I've got the agenda slide up there. Our topic here today is queuing behavior and trying to understand how long customers will wait. And I have to tell you, you know, having been in this industry over 30 years now, this is a topic I could literally talk about it for days. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to. We've got an hour-long session here, and we'll be saving, you know, at least 15 or 20 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So I'll rein my enthusiasm in a little bit, but I really do believe that when we talk about these items, we get at something that's really kind of at the heart and soul of what we do in contact centers, and it's what makes us so unique, because you know we've got this situation where our customers are the queue, and therefore they can control it. They can pull themselves out of queue when they need to. Now, you can hear that and say, well, you know, that's true in a lot of places. I go to the grocery store, I go to a bank, and I can do the same thing. Yeah, but what's different here is that you can't see it, and you can see it in those other places. So because of that, it really affects how we staff things, how we schedule things, how quickly we respond to problems. So it's due to that I really feel like this is a key topic for us. We're going to hit 4 items that are listed on the agenda here. I'm going to start off by just kind of talking about some of the factors that influence how tolerant a caller may be, how willing they may be to hang on and wait for you. Then we're going to get into the cost of abandonment when those folks don't wait. What does that mean to you? What's it mean to the organization? After that, we'll talk a little bit about the role of messaging. Messaging is one of those ways that we can somewhat influence that wait period, that tolerance that a customer may have. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about alternatives to queuing. There are some out there. Some are really, really poor alternatives, and I'll talk through those. Others are terrific, and we should at least consider them and see if they're appropriate for our organization. So with that, I'm ready to move on. The one thing that I did want to just reinforce, there is a Q&A area there. Please feel free, type in some questions. We will have time at the end. I'll make sure that we have time to talk through some of these things and get a little conversation going. So I'd like to start with the factors that are going to influence your caller tolerance. Really 6 key factors that I think we want to look at. And I'm going to start on one side of that equation, and these are the factors that we don't have a whole lot of control over. And when I say we, I'm really talking about the call center in general. There may be some parts of an enterprise that could control some of these things. But for the first one, well, there's really no part of our enterprise that can control this, right? There's always, some kind of external factors that could be going on. The doorbell rings, the baby cries, all those types of things. And that's, a lot of times, if you look at a report on abandonment, you'll see people abandoning at 2 and 3 seconds. You're gonna think, my gosh, what, that's a pretty high expectation level. Well, it probably has nothing to do with expectation. It has to do with something external that happened. And it's a factor, but, moving forward, there's really nothing we can do about it. It's a very small percent of our abandonment, and it's just, it's part of the deal of running a contact center. The next one is the availability of substitutes. Do we allow callbacks? Do we let people provide voicemail messages? What's our web like? How many things can be done out on the web? What about competition? Can I call competitors? If it's a sales operation, I probably can. If it's a service, maybe not, at least not now. And then there's always that just do nothing. I mean, a customer can elect to abandon and then not call and just not get the answer to their question. So there are other substitutes out there. Now, the call center may get involved in some of these things, but you may not. And, how the web is designed is usually not under the control of a call center. The level of emotion or motivation is another real key factor, and it's important to view it from the caller's perspective. We sometimes look at our reports and we look at the reasons behind calls, and we think, well, this is not a big deal. Somebody's calling for an account balance. Well, maybe they're calling for an account balance because, they have a chance to purchase a home, but they need a certain amount of down payment. And all of a sudden, the level of emotion and motivation becomes quite a bit higher on that call. And that will affect whether or not the person's willing to hang on or not. But we always have to look at it from the caller's perspective, not necessarily our perspective. Okay, those are 3 factors that are kind of loosely in that category of, we have little control over them. Here's 3 where we have a lot of control. The first one is how much time is already invested in our interactive voice response system, in our IVR, in our menuing. How much time did the person have to invest to just get to this point where the wait starts? Because remember, when you look at your data, and if you're looking at real-time data and you see a customer that's been waiting 43 seconds for an agent, 3 minutes and 12 seconds for an agent, whatever it may be, that's only part of their wait. They spent some time getting through your menus as well. So their investment is always larger than what you see. When it's 15 seconds larger, that's not a big deal. When it's 2.5 minutes larger, 3 minutes larger, well, then it is a big deal, and that will affect how tolerant they are. The quality of the wait experience. What is the customer going through? Are they listening to elevator music? Are they listening to loud noise? I hear a lot of times I call in, I hear messages start and then they stop, and then they pick up again in 40 seconds, and so it's a bad wait experience, and I'm not as likely to hang on when I have a bad wait experience. And then finally comes the length of the wait for the agent, and this is the one out of all of these 6 that we're talking about, that not only do we really have pretty much full control in the contact center, but it's the one out of these that really transpires at the moment. When you think about these other 5, do we have a great website that someone can go to? What kind of wait experience did we create? What kind of menu experience did we create? That's all stuff that was done in the past. And, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether it's good or it's not good, we can't change it this minute. The length of the wait for an agent is the thing that we can change this minute, which is why we really tend to focus on it when we're talking about this idea of queuing behavior and how long they wait, because it makes a difference to the customer, and we can have such an impact on it at the moment. So how do we do that? Well, here's a graph that I think every contact center should have. It's got to be customized for your data. Now, I know there's a lot on here, and I'm willing to bet that nobody on this call woke up this morning and said, boy, I hope somebody starts talking about y equals mx plus b today. In fact, I'm willing to bet that nobody's heard y equals mx plus b since about 7th grade algebra. But that's basically what this is. It's a form of it, because this isn't a straight line. But what you're really doing is you're saying, look, some percentage of callers will abandon, and there's a relationship between the percent that will abandon and the speed at which I answer. Now, in this particular graph, the graph on the left, I'm comparing service level to abandonment. You can also do this with average speed of answer. But I think it's incredibly important because it tells a very important story, and it's one that can really impact how you go about doing a lot of other things in your contact center. So I'll go through briefly. If this kind of work, if this kind of analysis isn't your thing, don't worry about it. This isn't actually nearly as difficult as it looks. There's, I'm sure, somebody in your organization that has some familiarity with numbers in Excel and can put this together. But what's on the left there, where that line is and that graph, is a scatter diagram. And the diamonds that you see there, the blue diamonds, are actually just points. And all you have to do is pull out a report. And I actually like doing it on an interval level. I think this was done at a daily level. But if I go at an interval level, if I have a decent amount of volume, and I just start plotting the points, and the points are what was the abandon rate and what was the service level, and where those two things intersect. So you can see a point all the way on the left here, just above the 80%. So there must have been a point where service level for this given day was, it looks like about 81, 82%. And if you follow that all the way over to the abandoned percent over on the right, you'll see it was about a 2.5% abandon rate that day. And that's where that point came from. You start putting a bunch of points out there, then you can ask Excel to draw a line, which is exactly what I did here. Now, this is for example purposes, so there's only, whatever, 8 or 9 points out there. Obviously, you would do this with more points than that so that you would get the best possible line. But this particular line here is the best guess at the relationship for this organization between service level and abandonment. And yes, unfortunately, it comes with its own formula attached to it. That's what you see up on the left here. But once you have that, what you can do is you can create the table on the right. And it's really the table on the right, I think, that matters to anybody, because now you can really start talking about these things with some degree of confidence in the relationship between how quickly you answer and caller tolerance levels. Now, I want to caution you, this is actual data here, but this is a client, and it doesn't mean that what they experience is what you'll experience. There's too many other factors. Think about the emotion associated with phone calls that will affect the relationship between these two. So you really do have to use your own data. But in their world, if they want to answer 80% of their calls in 30 seconds, which in fact is what they would do, it comes with an abandon rate of a little over 2%, 2.24%. And the power in that is, first of all, just in understanding it, but then secondly, understanding what happens when you start changing service levels. So in this case, if an executive says, hey, that's kind of aggressive, I don't want to staff to that level, why don't we knock that back to 70% in 30 seconds? Well, follow that table down a couple of lines, and what you're going to see is 70% service level equates to, I'm going to call it a 5% abandon, 4.91 on the table, but it's a 5% abandon rate. So now you can make a much more informed decision, and you can say, well, okay, are we willing, 80 to 70, it's kind of hard to understand what that means to our customers, but now what you do understand is you're more than doubling abandonment. So you need to be able to, if you want to go in this particular organization from 80% to 70%, you better be able to say, I'm comfortable with abandonment, actually more than doubling in this case. If you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't do it. So that's some of the power in this particular graph. And I think what it really speaks to is it really tells you how important real-time monitoring of queue conditions are, because you can see how quickly, you see the slope of that line and how quickly you can jump from, what most of us might consider to be reasonable abandon rates, 3, 4, 5%, and then all of a sudden, pretty quickly, service level dips below 60, and now you're looking at, close to a 10% abandonment. And now is the moment of truth, where if you do nothing and things get worse, and because you've seen it when you're watching your monitors, you can go from 58% service level to 40 to 30 in a heartbeat, and all of a sudden now you're talking about 15, 20% abandon rates. So if you do nothing, that's what happens. But if you took some action here, if you take some action as you see service levels slipping, and you can do it quickly, really quickly, you can bring that down, you can get it to a much more reasonable level. Hey, it might take you an hour or more to get it to that level that you want to be, but if you can just hold it close to that level, then abandonment is not going to be a serious problem, and it'll be easy to overcome. So that's a graph, it's an activity that I love doing in contact centers and really encourage everybody to try and do that. Okay, so we're talking about abandonment. We're looking at the numbers, and numbers are just numbers. You have to put some meaning behind them. So a question for everybody: what's the one thing you know about each and every caller? And I mean each and every one. And some of you may have ways out there. You may have authentications in place where people can put in account numbers and you can learn who a customer is. You have menus out there. You can ask them what they're calling about, and some customers will tell you that. But this is what you know about each and every caller, regardless of whether they go through a menu, regardless of whether they enter their account number. This is the absolute best time for him or her to call. And that's a really important point, because it really drives home how you have to take your capacity and match it to workload rather than trying to do it the other way around. We just don't get that option in contact centers. We have to figure out ways to staff up for when people are there, because they're calling at the absolute best time for them. And anything else that we do, if we don't answer and they have to call back, they're compromising them, and they're going to remember that. So that's question number one. Question number two: what's the best way to show customers they're valued? And I think, there's a lot of different answers to this one. I think some people would say engage them in a conversation. Some people may say find a way to reduce what they're spending with us. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could say. The one that I tend to fall back on that I think really makes a difference is respecting his or her time. Because when we do that, we really even step outside of our own relationship with our customers, and we and we say to that customer, hey, I understand you have better things to do with your time than to simply spend it with us. Glad that you're spending it with us. Hopefully we have a great conversation, but if I can do this in an efficient manner and not make you wait a long time, what I'm telling you is that I really value your time. I know that you have other things to do. And that's, you know, a great way, a great message that you really want to get across to all of the customers that you have and certainly the prospects that you have out there. And if you don't do that and you really talk about what's this cost of abandonment, if we're not respecting people's time, if they're waiting and waiting, what happens when they start to abandon? Well, you absolutely pay a price in customer satisfaction. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, what type of contact center it is, you're going to pay a price in customer satisfaction. You will not have met the minimum expectation that that customer has. And by minimum, I mean, you know, they thought, you know, you should at least answer the phone, and you didn't do that. Now, you know, maybe their standards are high, but whatever the case, you didn't meet it. You, in the same light, you expose your answer to that customer value question. Do you respect the customer's time? Well, in that customer's opinion, no, you really don't. And that gives them one more reason to try someone else. And when people defect from organizations and go to the competition, sometimes it's one big blow up. A lot of times it's, you know, death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's a little thing here, it's a little thing there, and you know, not picking up the phone in a timely manner is one of those things that can just send me over the edge to say, hey, it's time for me to look somewhere else. So you're going to pay that customer satisfaction price. There's usually a revenue implication too, certainly for a sales organization, because every abandoned call equals some loss of revenue. Now, you may say, well, you know, maybe not. They'll call back. Okay. They will call back, some of them, but not all of them. And so when you calculate the cost of an abandonment rate, you have to recognize that, you know, if your revenue is $200 per call and only 50% of your abandons are calling back, well, then an abandoned call is costing you $100, and there's no way around it. And once you realize that, it will change the way that you look at the operation. I did work for a client one time that knew that an average sale for them was $1,600, and they were in an industry where it was kind of hard to differentiate on anything, you know, other than it was price and service, and the competitors always price shopped each other, so that pretty much knocked price out. Everybody's prices were the same, so it came down to service. And if you're not answering the call, there's, you know, $1,600 walking away. So each and every abandoned call matters. If you're a service center, what do you lose? Well, you lose the opportunities for cross-sells and upsells and things like that, and those are becoming commonplace in contact centers now. So, you know, beyond the loss of customer satisfaction and potentially revenue down the road, even in a service center, you lose the opportunity for revenue right on today's call when you lose, when you have an abandoned call. So that's the price you pay. The cost is high. So what do? I want to give you 5 ideas, 5 things that you should think about because you're paying such a heavy price. First of all is to calculate that cost of an abandoned call. I think it's really important. If you're a sales center, I think it's a pretty easy thing to do. You start looking at average revenue per call and things like that, and it becomes easier. It's absolutely more difficult if you're a service organization. You have to start looking at how does abandonment affect customer satisfaction, and then how does customer satisfaction affect loyalty and repurchase rates and things like that. So it does get more indirect when it's a service organization, but you still have to do it because otherwise abandonment and abandonment percent, it runs the risk of just being a number instead of having real meaning to the organization, and it's got to have meaning out there. So we'll start with that. We'll calculate the cost of an abandoned call. And then we'll do what we did previously in that slide where we showed the graphs. We're going to tie abandonment to your speed of answer. And the reason we're going to do that, if you look at that first two, the truth of the matter is we don't directly affect abandon rates with our real-time reactions and our staffing and those types of things. What we do is we affect our speed of answer. And of course, it's the speed of answer that affects the abandon rate. But what I tend to look at, what I tend to measure a lot, when it's real time, I look at things like longest wait and things like that. So, I want to make sure I understand the link between how quickly I answer and what that means to abandonment. Third, I guess it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. We need to staff those centers properly. We've got to, and this is the long-term activity where we look out and we say how many full-time equivalents do we need by month to meet our demand, and we need to do that. We need to calculate it correctly, and we need to commit to getting people in and getting them trained in time for whatever workload increase may be coming. So we want to staff the center properly. And then, because it's a contact center and because, just having enough people hired isn't enough, we've got to put those real-time conditions in place, right? Because I can hire the right number of people for a given month, but at any given 15-minute interval, I may not have enough of them here. I may not have them scheduled properly. I may have a situation where too many are on vacation or too many are out sick. So even when I do staff it appropriately, I can't just walk away in a contact center. I have to watch things minute by minute by minute. I got to make sure that if things go wrong, I've got response plans that are in place that'll kick in immediately and take care of it. And in fact, over the course of our next couple of webinars, we'll be talking about those as well. And then last, the fifth item, and this is one, we forget this too often in contact centers, and it's so important when we educate staff on the importance of speed in a contact center. And this is that action of pulling people off of the phones and just really having a good discussion about it, because for us, it's not about productivity, and you shouldn't be presenting it in a productivity type manner that we want to answer calls quickly and have low talk times because it's more productive. That's not the deal here. What we're trying to do is we're going back to that comment previously that we want to respect the customer's time. And so how we do that is we make sure that we're not forcing any, unnecessarily long waits, waiting for an agent, or putting a caller on hold and, spending 5 minutes looking up information that we should already know or be able to get at our fingertips. It's really important to educate staff on that so that they understand that when we're out there and we're focusing on speed, it's not because we want to derive high productivity numbers, it's because there's customers out there, and those customers matter to us. Okay, so let me move on here and start talking about the role of messaging. So, it doesn't matter how well you staff, it doesn't matter how good your real-time reactions are, you're going to have people waiting, okay? Now, what can you do? Well, you basically have 3 entertainment options. One of them is music, right? And, back when I was running centers, we all seem to go down the elevator music route, which really isn't a terribly good one. Today, we can provide something more appropriate if the product or the service that we have has a small segment of people attached to it that may have a similarity in regards to the kind of music that they want. Well, we can choose that. There's even options out there where customers can select the type of music that they listen to while they're waiting. So we can do that as well. So that's one option for us. Another is what I'll call advertisements. I mean, truly they're messages, while we're waiting on hold. But what we're saying is, hey, we now offer this. When you get through, ask your rep about our mortgages and our new low mortgage rates that we have. So we can do those kinds of things. And I call them advertisements because they're strictly about what we have as an organization, and they're not really tailored. They're not, specific to what a caller may have asked about. And then we have the option of what I call useful messaging. And for it to be useful, it needs to be applicable to your industry, whatever it is that you're in and what the customers are calling about. It has to be something that you would consider valuable to your customers, and I'll even take that a little bit further and say valuable to a high percentage of your customers. And it may or may not link to one of your products or service, right? So the idea is, I know why people call me. I know what's on their mind about, banking and finances, if that's what you're in, about healthcare, if that's what you're in, so something that has to do with your industry. And so I gave a banking example there, and I chose that because I know many banks have credit monitoring services out there, and they'll happily sell you what that is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that in a message. But another great approach to show customers that you really do care about them and you want to make the wait useful is to tell them about this free option that's out there. And this truly is the free credit report that the U.S. government offers. Let them know about that. A lot of people aren't aware of it. So, that's one example. But, in your industry, I mentioned healthcare before. My gosh, that's, the number of options out there, what you could deliver that may be useful information is stunning. So just try and find things that people would be interested in because they're waiting. And if you make the wait interesting, they may be more tolerant. And the difference between useful messaging and advertisements tend to rub people the wrong way. They wonder if you're forcing a hold on them just to give them the advertisement. They could very well be wrong about that, but it doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong. It's what they believe, and if that's what they believe, that you're forcing a wait on them, then you're gonna take a hit in customer sat, and that's what you don't want to do with messaging. So what does it do for you? Well, don't worry, I won't go into this again, but we saw this before. But keep your eye on this table on the right and pick out a number that's, normally your service level goal if you have it. So if you're at 80%, keep your eyes there at the 2.24. If you're at 70%, keep your eyes at the 4.91 abandonment rate. And that's really what it does. This is what better messaging can do. It reduces abandonment for the same service level. Okay? Now, it doesn't really change anything else. What you're doing is you're improving it overall. You're making people more tolerant of the wait, so they're willing to wait longer. It does not change the fact that you still have to manage this closely. It doesn't change the fact that, when service level starts dipping below 60, you get to a critical point and you either respond to it and you get things back in line quickly, or you don't, and all of a sudden you start seeing, maybe not 15 to 20%, but maybe 12 to 15% abandonment. It's still something that you don't want. So it's really important to remember that messaging can help overall, but it really doesn't change any of your processes. You still have to be as diligent as you possibly can to get the best possible abandonment rate. Okay, last item, and then we'll open up for questions. So if you have some, please feel free to send a few along here. Alternatives to queuing, and I put this in because, there's a lot of talk about this these days. There's actually 5 options out there. Some of them you don't hear too much anymore. First one is a busy signal, which can truly be a real busy signal, meaning that the call just can't get through. There's not enough services, whether you've got traditional phone lines or whether you're carrying on the internet, there's not enough bandwidth, whatever the case may be. And then that will generate a real busy signal. But you can also put in artificial busy signals. You can set your phone system so that, if there's more than 20 calls in queue, send a busy signal. And it sounds to the caller just like a busy signal would, but it's not a real busy signal. It's what I would call an artificial one. which is almost the same as that second bullet point, which instead of giving a busy signal, you simply give a message, say, hey, we're too busy, call us back later, and you don't give the option to queue. And that's what's distinctive about those first two options there. There isn't an option to queue or do anything else. You basically just have to call back. To the extent that I can, I cross a line out of both of those. They're really not good ways to handle it. Now, there could always be times when you can give out a real busy signal. You certainly want to minimize that. But artificial busy signals, calls back later messages, we're well beyond that in contact centers now. And clearly it tells the customer that you don't respect their time. Voicemail is another option. If you're busy, you can send callers to voicemail to leave a message. I would suggest crossing that one out as well. It's not a real good approach in contact centers. People understand when they call a contact center, they wait, they get an answer. They don't normally get a voicemail option. And the problem with voicemail is you do have to listen to it. You have to get back to the person. They don't know when you're going to get back to them. There's going to be a lot of voicemail tag, and in the end, you're going to take a 5-minute phone call and turn it into 20 or 30 minutes worth of work. And you're going to be doing it at a time when you're really busy. So I'd scratch that one out too. You can do scheduled callbacks where it may be, leave your phone number and we'll call you back, but it may be more, provide us with the time that you would like to be called back and we'll call you then. And then the thing that you hear the most about these days is a virtual queue callback where, you tell the person, hey, the wait's going to be X number of minutes. Would you like us to hold your place in line? Tell us your phone number, and when your place in line gets to the front, we'll give you a call. And there's now a number of different options. A lot of phone system vendors can do that, and there's also add-on applications that will allow you to do that. This describes what it does. It does hold the customer's place in line and ask for that callback number, and then we call them back when it's their turn. So to the agent, it's actually just an outbound call as opposed to inbound, but same thing. If you do it, 3 things I think you should follow. First and foremost, it is not better than answering within service level. The best option is to have the right number of people on the phone all the time. And, some of the vendors out there try to present it as this is a way to improve customer satisfaction. It's better than a call abandoning for certain, but it's not better than answering it within service level. So don't use it as a plan, that, hey, I can pull people off the phone because everything will just go to virtual queue. It's supposed to be an occasional fallback when you simply don't have enough staff. Only offer when the wait is over X number of minutes, never less than 2, sometimes 3 or more, because you don't want a message saying, hey, your wait's going to be 43 seconds. Do you want to give us your phone number? And wait. By the time they give you their phone number, they're going to be at the front of the line. So I think a lot of the vendors try and go with 2 minutes. I actually think 3 or more is a little bit more appropriate. Customers will typically wait that long, although they don't want to. And then finally, be slightly conservative when you're tuning. It's better to estimate a 5-minute wait and call in 3 than vice versa. You don't want to be too far off with that either, but conservative is better than being too aggressive. So those are just 3 practices there. There's a lot of things that you really should do if you're going to do virtual queuing to do it right, but those are 3 things to think about. And with that, we've come to the close of the presentation. So I think I need to turn it back to you folks and see if we've got some questions out there.
Okay, we have received one question so far, Jay. How can you put a cost on an abandoned call in a service environment?
Okay, good question. What I would do is, I think the cost that you're really talking about, I'd go down 2 paths. The first one is, do you do any cross-selling or upselling? So if you do that, I want to go through and figure out how much revenue did I bring in, even though it's a service center, how much revenue did I bring in per call? So, the number is going to be lower than if it's sales because we don't often get the cross-sell or the upsell, but even if it's $2 a call, I want to know that. So that's my starting point. And then I want to layer on what price am I paying for customer satisfaction. And what I really want to do, I want to really tackle that within my customer sat surveys. I want to ask people how satisfied they were with the call. I want to ask them how long they waited and whether they felt that that was a reasonable amount of time. And with that information, I can start to make the links between how satisfied people are and how long the wait times are. And every organization out there should have an understanding of, hey, what does a percentage of customer satisfaction mean to me? So that's where I would like to go with that. It's a much more convoluted calculation when you're talking about service than sales, but it's doable, and you have to make some assumptions, but get everyone to agree on the assumptions, and then you have something that's really tangible in front of you. Then you can say, hey, this is what it costs us to lose a call.
Jay, we also have another question. How do you keep people waiting in a chat scenario?
Well, first of all, you should be sending, and just like email, as soon as you get something in from somebody on a chat, you should send them an acknowledgement. And so if it's a situation where you're queuing, there's a lot of systems out there now that can kind of calculate, hey, what's the estimated wait time going to be in a chat situation? But that initial message should say something about, we'll be with you within 2 minutes, within 3 minutes, something like that. And that gives somebody something that they can hold on to. Chat's interesting because, unlike a phone call, when somebody's in a chat session, you can be relatively certain that they're on the internet. They're probably at their PC, although they could be on their phone, and they can do other things. So I think it becomes really important to update what a wait time may be. So, and I've actually had this happen to me. I use chat a lot to see how people are using it. And, so sometimes you'll get the, hey, 8 or 10 minutes. And while, on a phone call, that may be the kiss of death. There's not a whole lot of people that wait that long. In chat, they will because, they're online and they're doing other things. And that I mentioned I use it because I sit here using my PC all day. So if I have to do something service-wise, I'll open up a chat, and if somebody says 10 minutes, that's okay. I'm doing email and a million other things, So, it's really about sending that initial acknowledgement and letting them know, nobody's here right away, and then updating it on a regular basis. And there are systems out there that can do that, that can estimate that time.
Okay, we've unmuted the participants, and we have 2 more questions queued up, but does anyone want to ask a live question for Jay? Okay, next question, is the abandon rate more important than service level or ASA?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so if anybody's ever worked with a consultant before, you'll know that our answer to everything is it depends, and that's because then we can draw it out, and that's more billable hours, right? So, and I'm going to use that here. I'm going to use the it depends answer. I think abandon rates and total abandon calls and all can be very powerful in the right context because people can understand it. When you say 5% of calls abandoned, even if you don't work in a contact center, you can kind of wrap your head around that a little bit. When you say, we answered 68% of calls in 30 seconds, unless you're really familiar with call answer tables and you spend your day, looking at queuing calculations, it's hard to wrap your head around that because, well, what about the other 32% of calls? How long did they wait? Nobody knows. So I like abandonment for those reasons. But the truth of the matter is when I'm managing the operation, I can't really manage to abandonment. I can only answer the phone, and I can answer it as quickly as possible. So service level and ASA are the things that measure that, how quickly I answered. I happen to like service level better than ASA because I think it's a little bit more informative. ASA is an average, and we all know that averages can be deceiving. So I like service level a little bit better. So, when I'm talking about management and operations and things like that, I fall on the service level ASA side. When I'm talking about strategic discussions and, talking to people from outside of the contact center, then I may talk a little bit more about abandonment.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, we have one more that was typed in. Should abandoned calls be part of a real-time display in a contact center?
I believe abandonment should be on there. So there's a number of different ways to do it. I don't know if it's as effective to show abandonment for the day. The thing I like about real-time displays is I really like the recency of the data. And if you look at, what was our abandon rate throughout the day, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we opened up at 7 in the morning. I may see something that I don't like, I may see 7%, but the truth of the matter may be is that all happened before 10 a.m. and we've been, running fine since then. So I like seeing abandonment on there. It's just a question of what do you want to put there. My answer to that is I want recency. So, number of abandoned calls in the past 10 minutes or something like that, or for the interval so far, if your interval is 15 or 30-minute intervals, that's good. Abandon rate for the interval so far, that's good too. Those are things that have some recency to them, and I love recency in real-time data because that's the point of real-time data. I need to get a snapshot of now so that I know, do I need to be taking action or do I not need to be taking action?
Okay, that was the last question. Unless anyone has a question that they would like to ask Jay, you can either type it in or just unmute your phone and speak. Okay, I guess that will wrap up today's session. The next session is May 21st, so you'll be receiving your invite a few weeks before that. And the topic is queue management, little-known tips and tricks. Also, there's a brief 2 to 3 question survey following today's webinar. If you could just take a second, it should just pop up as soon as the webinar is over. If you could just take a minute to fill that out, and it gives you an opportunity to suggest future topics for these Ask the Expert webinars. And we'd like to thank Jay for presenting today. Yeah, and everyone for attending, and we look forward to May's webinar. Thanks, everyone.